Okay, so I'll be doing the muscle manual testing for the hip external and internal rotation. And I'll be including the gravity elimination testing as well. So for the hip internal and external rotation, I both have my client seated, suspended off the ground. So for internal rotation, I have my client here, and I'll be standing directly on the internal portion. So I will have my for to do passive range of motion. I have my working hand on the internal portion of her thigh and my working hand on her ankle. And I'm just going to push outwards. Okay. And then I'm going to have you rest. Okay. And now I'm going to be doing active range of motion, which is basically putting my same working hand on her thigh. And I'm going to have you move outwards. Okay. All right. And now rest. All right, and now I'll be doing the muscle manual testing for this portion for hip internal rotation. So I will be placing my working hand on the outside. The inside, and then I'm gonna have her. I'm gonna hold it on the internal. I'm gonna have you push on the external. I'm gonna have you push. Hold for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, and now rest. Okay, and she tested a 5 on the grading scale for maximum resistance. Okay, and now we're moving on to. Alright, so now for hip external rotation, I'm gonna be actually standing on the outside. So I'll be standing the outside instead of where I was initially positioned for hip internal rotation. So I'm placing my working hand on the outside and stabilizing hand on the outside and my working hand on where her ankle is. And I'm gonna push inward to internal rotation. Okay? All right. And then I'm gonna have you relax. All right, and then that is going to be the passive range of motion. So that was for any observable and changes, and for my initial assessment. And now for the active range of motion, I'm just going to be using my stabilizing hand only on the outside of your thigh, and then just move towards internally. All right. Okay, now rest. Okay, and now I'm going to be applying the manual resistance. So, I'm gonna be placing my stabilizing hand on the outside of her distal thigh, and then also my working hand on the where her ankle is, and then I'm gonna have you push into my hand this way. Okay, and now she tested, and from observation and from that test that we just did, she scored a 5 for maximum resistance. Okay, so now I'm going to be doing the gravitational, the elimination testing on my client. She is just laying down in a supine position now, and so I'm going to be doing hip external rotation. So I'm only placing my hand, my working hand or stabilizing hand, I mean, and then I'm going to be doing for external rotation. I have my client move externally, so move outwards. Okay. All right. And since she did the full range of motion, she tested a 2. But that's with the elimination of gravity. Okay, move everything back. All right. So now we're gonna do hip internal rotation, and on the same leg, I'm gonna be placing my stabilizing hand, and it'll be doing internal rotation. So move your leg in. Okay. All right, and so she just demonstrated full range of motion, so she scored a 2, but that is with the elimination of gravity. All right, so I'm going to be doing muscle manual testing for both the wrist extension and flexion, and also I will be doing the gravity eliminated position as well. So I have my client in a seated position with her feet planted to the ground, and as the assistant, I am standing directly next to her. So for wrist extension, I will be going through passive range of motion to observe or assess any of the wrist extensors. So now I would be using my stabilizing hand and I'll be palpating her arm or her forearm, and she is again in a pronated position. So I'll be palpating her wrist area, and I'll be gliding my working hand under, and I'll be gliding her into passive range of motion. Okay, and now I'm going to have her relax. And now I will be doing active range of motion, so just go ahead and move your hand up. Okay. After I did the assessments and observations, now I will be applying the muscle manual resistance testing. So here I will be palpating. So my stabilizing hand is going to be where I'm palpating her wrist. And my working hand is going to be under her hand, and she's going to hold that for resistance for about 3 holds. 1, 2, 3, and now relax. And now and from everything that we've done, she scored a grade 5 for maximum resistance. Okay, so for the gravity elimination testing, I will have for the extensors, I will have my client again in a seated position, feet planted to the ground. As assistant, I am standing directly next to her. And so I have for the wrist extension, I will have my client in a neutral position. And so my working hand is going to be where I'm palpating her wrist, and she's going to do active range of motion. So can you move your hand back? All right. So as from my observations, she scored a grade 2 with the elimination of gravity.
Lame.
Okay, so now I'm going to be doing the wrist of flexion. So this is going to be also the muscle manual testing, and also I'll be demonstrating the gravity elimination position for the or testing for the wrist flexion. So okay, so let's do for wrist flexion. I'm gonna have my client in a supinated position. Like this is fine. So supinated position, I will have for the passive range of motion to observe and to assess any of the wrist flexors for the movement. So I'm gonna be palpating the wrist area, and I will be guiding my hand under, and I will be assisting her hand. So just to bend your hand up. Okay. So, and now rest, relax. Okay, and then now I'm going to be palpating with my stabilizing hand. And can you have your hand move up one more time? All right, okay, and rest, relax. Okay, and again, if I have not mentioned, my client is in a seated position, and as assistant, I am again standing directly next to her with her hand in a supinated position. And so now I will be applying the muscle manual testing. So my stabilizing hand is going to be on her wrist, and my working hand is going to be directly on her palm. And can you move your hand up? Okay, and I'm going to have you hold for 3 times. 1, 2, 3, and now relax. All right, and now she just performed a grade 5 with the maximum resistance. And now we're going to be doing the gravity elimination testing for the wrist flexion. So now I'm going to have my client hand in a neutral position from supinated. So I'm going to... Okay, so now I will be doing the gravity eliminated process testing. I'm going to have my client in a seated position with her hands supinated for wrist flexion. And I will be having her into a neutral position. So she switched from a supinated to a neutral position. I will be palpating with my stabilizing hand only, and I will have her do full range of motion for active range of motion. And could you move your hand inwards for flexion? Okay. All right. And then move your hand back. Okay. All right. And then have you relax. And what we just performed was the full range of motion, and she scored a complete 2 with gravity eliminated.